Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of NC-17. My name is Josh. Lisa's out and about doing her thing, which is always a good thing. Today we are blessed with writer, director, actor, all around good person, and someone I'd like to call one of my close friends, James Edwards. How you doing today?
Real good, Josh. How you been, man?
I've been good. I've been good. Uh, so first off, how was your New Year?
It was decent, uneventful, which is always good.
Oh yeah. So you directed a movie called Trivial.
Mhm.
Stars Sasha Graham and yourself and Drew Fortier, Erica Dyer, uh, Douglas Espers, and numerous other people.
Mhm.
I try to remember everybody.
Mhm.
uh, so the movie revolves around this game show hostess who let's just say she's on her revenge tour.
Most definitely.
So how did you come up with the characters, and like how did you come up with the story?
Um, my thing with this movie was after having my second film. To kind of backtrack, my first film, her name was Krista, was a very personal project,
Yes.
and when we did our follow up, Brimstone Incorporated, it was more just a kind of a fun time kind of thing. And what I noticed was the second one did not was not received well. I mean, it had its fans, but it didn't get anywhere near the recognition of Krista. So my line of thinking with this was, I wanted to go back to basics. I wanted to do something that was a bit more personal. So the idea was that, and unfortunately, I can't really give away too much because as far as the way the movie came about, because it'll spoil the ending. But let's just say that the best answer for that is if you listen to the audio commentary when after you watch the movie.
Oh yeah. uh so here's a good question. So was Sasha the first choice to play Laurel?
Yes, yeah, that was one of those where I was fortunate enough to work with Sasha in the '90s, and she had completely retired. By the time I started directing movies, she had completely retired from acting. She's actually a very accomplished author, and I had reached out to her to do a cameo in Krista, and we had so much fun. She came back for Brimstone. So when the idea of this movie came about, it was one of those where it would be great to see Sasha in a lead role. So yeah, and she just, I mean, literally, she is the heart and soul of this movie. She just knocked it out of the park.
Oh yeah. Uh I will say, like, I've seen, like I said, I've seen all your movies. Well, almost all your movies. But I did see Krista. Her name was Krista, and I did see Brimstone Incorporated. To me, the way you kind of navigated from Her Name Was Krista to Brimstone to this, it kind of seemed like you went the love route the first time,
Mhm,
which was good. You went kind of like the psychological break the second time.
mhm.
And this one, it went more along the lines of like, and correct me if I'm wrong, but to me, from watching it a couple times now, it kind of went to where it was more along the lines of these are the ramifications of the actions of not one, but multiple people.
Right. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, if there is a message in there at all, that would be it. My line, what I tend to do with my movies, and I'm not quite sure, it's completely subconscious, but I do realize that I'm doing it now. Is I tend to write scripts that I'm going to direct almost as a direct result of genres that I don't particularly care for. So, like to give you an example, with Krista, it's more of a romantic drama than anything else. Well, I've never been a fan of romantic comedies or romantic dramas, so this was like my spin on that genre, you know.
Oh yeah.
Um, with um, with Trivial, and I'm don't get me wrong. I mean, I'm not hating on them. It's just not my thing. I was never a fan of the whole early 2000s torture porn movement. You know, the your hostels, your saws, that kind of thing. It just wasn't my thing. You know,
Right.
But again, the idea was, okay, well, what don't you like about this? And if you had to do one of those movies, what would you do? So that's kind of where Trivial came about.
Oh yeah. Uh, I know that you and Drew have a very tight friendship.
Oh yeah,
You know, like he's been in your movies, you've been in his movies. I mean, right now, I mean, it's like to me that's a strong brotherhood that you
oh yeah.
guys have. So was he the first choice to play his character of Brian?
Pretty much everyone that was cast in the film, almost everybody was, as I was writing it, who I pictured playing the role. And Drew's one of those guys, and I've gone on record and said this before. Drew is one of the people that I won't make a movie without him. I mean, I even got when what was it? I just came off of while we were finishing Trivial, I had done a movie for J.R. Bookwalter that I wrote called Side Effects May Vary. And I got Drew involved in that as well because, again, he's amazing to work with. He's amazingly talented and literally the nicest guy you'll ever meet. So, I mean, yeah, I can't imagine doing a movie without him.
Oh yeah. Actually, had it not been for Drew, you and I would have never met.
That's true. That's very true.
You know. So, but so there's one scene in particular in Trivial that kind of made me like, okay, this movie is going to be really like just right on the edge of your seat kind of thriller with the way Sasha's character and you interacted. I mean, you putting it on paper and then putting it on film. I'm like, it's either master genius or he's batshit crazy. But I'm gonna go with master genius.
Right. I appreciate that. Yeah, give me the benefit of the doubt.
But no, it's your character plays not so liked character.
Mm-hmm.
And when me and my wife was watching it, she was like, I kind of hope something bad happens. I'm not gonna ruin it for nobody, but the way your character was portrayed and how you wrote it did come across.
Thank
You
you.
know,
Well, my line of thinking with that, honestly, was I've the last two movies that I've done that I've directed, I end up playing a fairly nice guy.
yes,
So it's one of those where it's like I like the opportunity because I when I first started acting, I mostly got cast as the villain or the lead character's wacky, funny best friend. So the idea of getting to kind of go back to those roots and play a guy that is basically a complete he has very little redeeming quality. But you're also fascinated with him because you don't want to like him, but he's funny. So it's
yes,
almost like you almost don't want to lose him. So you have that kind of but plus I love the fact that pretty much everyone for the most part all the characters are terrified of Sasha except for him because
yep,
his ego gets the best of him.
oh yeah. Uh, so the concept of it like being a game show, I mean, how did that come about? Because nowadays you got so much reality TV, everything is a game show, you
Mm-hmm.
know. So did you take inspiration from that, or was that just something that came to your head?
That actually, growing up and being one of those kids that didn't like going to school, I was able to convince my parents that I was sick, so I stayed home from school a lot. And the only thing to really watch during that time are game shows. Nothing else is on. So at least when I was growing up, so I remembered that kind of thing where it was like this a ridiculous host and this really fake atmosphere. And I always loved that aspect. And the idea of having it in a horror setting I thought was fun. I mean, realistically, I'm not the first one to do that. Um, I know there was Death Row Game Show and a film that I absolutely adore called Slashers that came out of Canada. So I mean, it's not necessarily a new premise, but I hope I at least put an original spin on it. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. Speaking of slashers, that's the one where the people are on like that Japan game show.
Mm-hmm.
I own that movie, so
It's a lot of fun. I really really enjoy that one a lot. And again, it's one of those where I'm always worried about ripping off somebody else. So I think that's actually why I tend to, when I write things, concentrate on things that I don't like versus things that I like. Simply because of the fact I know that specifically, and I can pinpoint it exactly. There was a single line in Brimstone Incorporated that I was so proud of myself for writing. I was just like, oh, that's such a badass line. I love this line. And after the movie was released, and nobody's called me on it yet, so I'm kind of outing myself for this. After the movie was released, I was rewatching it again, and it dawned on me why that line was so great. Because Charles Bronson said it in one of the Death Wish films. And I'm like, shit. So it's one of those where I tend to, if anything, I'm going to be inspired by, again, things that I don't particularly care for. And I'm not even necessarily saying that they're bad movies. I'm saying for me personally, I don't have a connection with them. So I kind of put a spin on it to where what would make me have a connection with it kind of thing.
Oh yeah. Uh, let's talk about location because this movie was primarily just in one location.
Yeah.
Is there a lot of like difficulty filming in that location, or is it you find it more freedom because you guys have that location?
This was the first movie that I had shot that was pretty much consecutive. Because normally the way we shoot with these kind of budgets, we'll shoot for one day and then break for like 2 or 3 weeks, and then shoot for another day or maybe 2 or 3 days. But normally, I mean, like it usually takes a couple of months to shoot one of these.
Yeah.
Whereas the Trivial, because it was a one location film, I thought it would be wise to just rent an Airbnb that was willing to let us basically completely redesign their garage, and kind of we would all basically live there. So because a lot of the actors were coming from out of states, it would be a constant revolving door where it's like 2 days somebody would stay and then they'd move, and then another 2 days with another actor. And I mean, the only people that were there the entirety of the shoot at that location were Sasha, myself, and my director of photography, Gordon Cameron. So it was a revolving door. Now, I'm not going to lie to you, there are pros and cons to it. The pro is that you can get a lot of stuff done. The con of it is it's exhausting. You kind of need those days off.
Oh yeah.
And especially with shooting in a location that you're paying to stay at, if you run behind, it can be nerve-wracking because realistically, it's like, okay, we have to break all this stuff down and come back. We're going to have to try and make this look exactly like it did before. And
Oh
we
yeah.
actually ran into that because we had to reshoot the ending. So we ended up, I mean, literally like 6 months later, having to come back and hope we all look the same, and setting the setup and shooting the ending again because we had some difficulty with it. So
Oh yeah. Uh, so for those out there who don't know, you've been on the show a couple times. You actually got your start at 12 years old
yes,
in a back then unknown film, but I'm pretty sure it's a cult classic now. But The Dead Next Door.
that's correct. Yes.
You know, which fantastic movie. You know, and like going from there to here, I mean, the journey obviously had its ups and downs, but did it
Right.
have more ups or more downs?
Oh, definitely more downs. I mean, it's don't get me wrong. I love the independent film industry. I mean, I don't know what else I would do if I wasn't doing this. I don't have any other skills. So it's one of those things where. But that being said, I'm not going to lie. I did a lot of stinkers. To be perfectly honest with you, a lot of the movies that I acted in, or yeah, a lot of the movies that I acted in were just not very good. And the reason for that is because I would just pretty much, I wanted to keep working. So I would pretty much take any role that came my way. Now, the problem with that is then you've done 40 movies and you'll only admit to seven of them. So,
Oh yeah. Uh, one of my favorite like things when we talk is like your honesty, whether it be good or like brutal. Your honesty is just like you don't hold back. And the thing is like I think that's what's missing in Hollywood today. is like people don't want to be critical about what they've done or what they've seen or what they've been in or anything like that. And like to me, you have to take yourself serious in doing these films. I mean, you write them, you direct them, you star in them, you pretty much cast them. I mean, you're a one man wrecking crew when it comes to the independent scene, and that's the God's honest truth.
And I appreciate that sentiment, but I'll be honest with you. The only reason that I've been able to pull that off, and I've said this time and time again, anytime anybody asks me if like somebody's starting off new in the business and they want to make their own movie, if they ask me my what was it, if I had any words of wisdom, always surround yourself with people more talented than yourself. That's it. Literally. And be open to ideas. I'm not saying you have to use every single one of them, but you don't have all the answers. I don't have all the answers, you know? So it's like, I like the idea of if we're stuck on something where it's like, well, what does my hair and makeup person think? Or what does this actor think? Or what does the boom guy think? You know, I try and be as approachable on sets as possible
Yeah.
because, to be quite frank with you, in my heyday, I mean, I wasn't always like this, to be perfectly honest with you. When I was acting, specifically in the 90s, I had quite a bit of a, to be quite frank, undeserved ego. And I was difficult to work with. And to be perfectly honest with you, age is a humbler, you know. So it's like as I've gotten older, it's just like you kind of look back on that and go, wow, you know, yeah, that you really don't want to be that person. So yeah, I try my best. I don't always succeed, but I try my best to get along with everybody.
Oh yeah. Uh, so your films right now, you can get them a couple places. You can
Mhm.
see Brimstone and Incorporated, and her name was Krista, I believe, on Amazon Prime.
Yeah, you can see them on. In fact, you can see Trivial on Prime as well.
Okay.
Um, yeah, you can see all of them on Amazon. Let's see. I'm trying to think. We've got Amazon. We've got Tubi. Trivial hasn't hit Tubi yet, but the other two have. Um, I just, you know what? I can give you a full listing here. Hang on. I should have been prepared for that.
Oh no, you're good.
Let's see here. So the full listing is that it is available on Vudu, Google Play, Microsoft Store, YouTube Movies, and Amazon Prime. And then, like as a judge, soon to be on, I'd say within a couple of months, probably on Tubi as well.
All right. Uh, so I've actually shown Her Name Was Krista to a couple of my friends.
Mhm.
They loved it. Well, there was one lady that was like, "Not my thing." I understand.
Right, right. Well, I mean, I'm asking a lot of an audience with that one, to be perfectly honest with you. So,
Oh yeah. Uh, but I also showed the same group, Brimstone Incorporated. They all loved it. And then I showed them Trivial because they all came over. We were just like, all right, I gotta show you this movie.
right.
So we were watching it, and there was one of my friends literally said, "He reminds me of me." I was like, "Yeah, but there's a difference. His is fake. You're really an asshole." But I mean, just the fact that people out there are saying, "Hey, I can relate to these characters." I
Hmm.
mean, that speaks volumes to what you guys do.
Well, and again, that was always my biggest complaint about not just indie films, but movies in general. If I can't connect with a character, I'm not going to enjoy your movie. It's that simple. And the only way you're going to connect with a character is with decent writing and decent acting. So, one thing that really bothers me, working as an actor, one thing that really bothers me on a lot of indie films is there's little to no rehearsal time. And it's just like, I'm sorry, that's something that's really important to me as a director, where it's like, if you don't get that opportunity to rehearse with your actors and block your actors and have everybody, you're just wasting time on the set. You're wasting everybody's time. So,
Oh yeah. Speaking, so let's go a little bit more detail on to trivia without giving spoilers.
mhm.
Uh, so the choice of weapon, how did that come about? Because that she's vicious. That's all I'm gonna
Yeah.
say.
I actually found that thumb blade at what was it? There was I do a lot of thrifting because I try and collect very weird statues and just weird artifacts, stuff like that. I love surrounding my house and movie memorabilia and just weird shit. And I'd found that and I'd never seen one before, and I immediately bought it. And when I was writing the script, I was trying to figure out what I wanted Sasha to injure people with, and I'm like, oh, that's perfect. I love that. Well, again, when you're doing movies, especially with a main prop, you end up needing additionals in case something, if you end up losing that one prop, you're screwed.
Yeah.
So I ended up getting in like probably 15 of these things. And it was nice too, because for our Indiegogo, a lot of people that donated to it got one of those blades. And I tried to make sure to swap them out as much as possible. That way every single one that went out was at least used in the film at some point. So
Oh yeah. Oh, that's awesome. uh, so let's talk about, well, the way you envisioned the film. I'm 100% sure it came out the way you wanted it. Now, my interpretation of the film was is these characters on the game were the victims, and she was the villain.
oh,
But the way,
100. I like to think of her as an anti-hero. Let's put it that way. Someone who, because the thing that's nice about anti-heroes is at least then you understand why they're doing it. You
oh
know,
yeah,
that, I mean, like, don't get me wrong, there are plenty of films, especially horror films, where you get behind the villain. But typically you get behind the villain because your victims are idiots. You know, that either they're idiots or they're cardboard cutouts. You know, they're flesh props. And
yeah,
I try and I try very much to not do movies with flesh props, you know.
yeah.
So the idea of Laurel, Sasha's character, I really like the idea of characters that you know they're doing something wrong, but you stand by them anyway, you know.
Oh yeah. Uh, I will say though, toward the end of the movie, when I found out the reason things were going on, it kind of flipped to where she was the victim and they were the villain.
Oh, exactly. And that's what I wanted. I wanted the audience to basically not know how they really feel about her until the very end. You
Oh
know.
yeah. Well, I can tell you one thing though. My wife really liked the way that she handled the people. She don't. My wife, if anyone knows her, she's more of a Disney and kind of lovey-dovey kind of stuff,
Right.
you know. But when it comes to a movie that I'm reviewing for a guest or someone says, "Hey, can you review this for me?" I always get her involved because it's always best to have someone else's critique outside
Oh,
of my
absolutely.
own.
Yeah.
And her personal preference is not what I watch. I will make that clear. But she did want me to tell you that she thoroughly enjoyed the movie.
Oh, cool. I'm so glad to hear that.
And she said toward the end she started getting a little bit teary eyed because of why she was doing what she was doing.
Right.
So that to me, I'm like, well, damn. Now you're making me want to get teary eyed.
And honestly, that to me is the highest compliment because that basically tells me that the story works. You know.
Yeah. So getting to a point to where you knew what was going to happen with your character and actually just all the characters in general, the practical effects you guys use, uh, how hard was that to like apply and stuff like that?
You know, surprisingly, not much. The last two films that I've done, I've been working with a local effects artist named Ron George, and he's just absolutely phenomenal. I could not sing his praises more. He's just fantastic, and and unlike a lot of these guys, he's upfront. Where it's like if you got an idea that he feels is outside of his wheel well, he's not going to lie to you and say, "Oh yeah, I'll figure it out." No, he'll be like, "No, I probably can't pull that off, but I'll find out either how to or find somebody who can." You know, so yeah, he's just and again, my one of my fears, because I did not necessarily want this to be a splatter fest, but I wanted the kills to be effective, you know.
Yeah,
So like the one thing that I kept expressing to him is I want it to be real. I want the wounds to look real. I want it to be as realistic as possible. Now, realistically, bodies only hold so much blood.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things where it's like on film, a ton of blood looks great, but it's not exactly. It's not going to have that same impact as if you're. It's almost like you're watching this. I hate to say a found footage thing, but like a newsreel of some horrible incident that's happened. And that's kind of more what I was looking for, specifically with each of the Chelsea grins when she cuts their faces.
Yeah.
My line of thinking with that is if we can't pull that off, this movie's not going to work at all. So we did a bunch of tests with that. And right off the bat, I mean, he knew exactly what I wanted. It turned out exactly like I wanted. I was really happy. In fact, there were two effects in the movie that I did cut. And this was not his fault at all. It just didn't work out. Initially, one of the characters, I'm not going to say which one, but it's in the deleted scenes. One of the characters, aside from what happens to them in the film, gets lobotomized,
Oh.
gets an ice pick shoved into the corner of his eye.
Yeah.
And we did the effect, and by no fault of Ron's, I didn't like the way it didn't look realistic to me. So I'm like, you know what, we're just going to cut it. We have enough to where the kill works. It was overkill anyway. And the other one, shockingly enough, was, and I'm not going to say which character, but the head smash scene, where initially I wanted someone to build a prosthetic head that had movement to where the mouth would open a little bit, the eyes would kind of twitch. And I hired a guy to do it, and unfortunately, he fell through. It didn't work out.
Oh yeah.
And Ron basically came to me and said, I know what you're looking for, but to be perfectly honest with you, if we use the actor's actual face, it's going to play better because I don't care how good a fake head is, it's still going to display as a fake head.
Right.
So we toyed around with it, and I think it actually is much more effective the way it plays in the movie now.
Yeah. Uh so here's a question I've not asked anybody.
Yeah.
So when you're directing movies, the time constraint of how long you can make the movie or how short you can make the movie, how does that come into play? Because I mean, if it's too long, like Terrifier 2, I mean, that was really 2.5 hours of just blood and gore.
Right.
Uh, some will say a little bit too much, some will say not enough.
Mm-hmm.
I'm more of the latter, not enough, but whatever. uh, so how does that come into play when you're directing a movie?
Realistically, with these type of movies, you should typically keep it at under 90 minutes. I've never been able to do that. I'm very wordy. I like longer movies. I don't get me wrong. I'm thrilled about the fan base that I've been able to acquire. But at the end of the day, if I'm making a movie that I'm chopping up just to reach a time limit,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I'm not willing to do that.
All right.
Um, to kind of put things into perspective, I'm also the guy that made the 2 hour Necrophile movie. So it's like, I mean, time realistically, if they're not going to like your movie in 2 hours, they're probably not going to like it in an hour and a half either.
Yeah.
So now I will say this: it also depends on the type of movie it is. Now, where Krista was a lot more psychological, I feel that Trivial is more action paced. So, like to give you an example, the hardest thing about Trivial for me was when we had our very first cut, or our very first rough cut of Trivial.
Yeah.
It came in at almost 2.5 hours long,
Oh dang.
and I'm just like, that can't happen. We can't do it.
Yeah.
So I did something that, to be quite frank with you, I'm not very good at. I killed my babies. I started chopping away at it and removing some things, and the majority of them are on the Blu-ray and DVD. But it's one of those where it was difficult for me to wrap my mind around. Oh, no, everything in my script needs to be in there. It's like, no, it doesn't. No, it really doesn't. So we were basically able to get a movie that was I believe the initial cut was 2 hours and 23 minutes. We got it down to about an hour and 40. So
Oh yeah. Uh, well, first off, you know how I feel about Her Name Was Krista. Excellent movie. You
Thank
know,
you.
when we talked about that one, I mean, not to go all the way back, but to me, that was like the perfect way of doing a true love story in the horror genre. You know, with Trivial, I could have went 2 hours with her doing Revenge, but I mean, I understand, what you're saying. It's kind of like I mean, you don't want Titanic if it's not going to be great.
Right. Well, and that's the thing. It's like, are we an R-rated show? Let me ask you that. Or
Yeah,
okay. One thing, one of the people that kind of taught me, especially recently, about editing your film is my actually my mentor, J.R. Bookwalter, who I started with on The Dead Next Door. And he's we nickname him the Butcher because he will take your movie and just start chopping full sequences out of it. He gives no fucks. And basically he taught me the art of what he calls frame fucking, where it's like you basically have to look at a scene. It's like, okay, well, we can lose 3 seconds from that. We can lose 2 seconds from that. We can, and eventually you can whittle down your movie. Now, again, me personally, I like a longer film,
yeah.
but not everybody does, and in fact, most people in the indie scene don't care for it. And again, I can tell you that if Krista hadn't been the type of film that it was, I don't think people would have watched it for 2 hours. I really don't.
I mean, that's a fair assessment. So we got about 7 minutes left. Here is an important question that my wife says I should ask you,
Yeah.
which when I thought about it, I was like, that's an excellent question. Do you think you have directed your opus, or do you think that your opus is still out there?
See, that's a tough question. It's actually a double edged sword because on one hand, the I only honestly thought I would ever direct one movie. I set out to direct Krista, and that was supposed to be it. And it just so happened that I had more stories to tell. Now, that being said, Krista will always have the most important place in my heart because it was my directorial debut.
Right.
Now that being said, I have to always, and I think every director has to always hope that they've got another what they feel is a great movie in them, because if they don't, what's the sense in doing this? I mean, i
Exactly.
know i know many directors who their main goal is just to make movies. They don't care what they are, they don't care, they just want to be actively working. And that never really was something that interested me. In fact, to be perfectly honest with you, I direct out of, I think we've talked about this before. I direct out of necessity. I don't have any deep rooted love of directing. I direct because I want my scripts done the way I want them done. And I want to play roles that I want to play. That's it.
Oh yeah.
I'm not out here to prove anything as a director. I don't expect to get a Hollywood gig out of it. I mean, if the opportunity ever arose, of course I'd be thrilled. But am I expecting it? No. I mean, in the same way that with acting since I was 12 years old and still living in Ohio, it's like I'm thrilled with having the audience that I have, but I don't plan on making enough money to buy that Porsche I always wanted,
Oh yeah. Uh well, I for one, and I hope you believe me when I say this, always going to be a fan.
Oh,
Eh,
thank you.
eh,
Really appreciate that.
it's no problem. And through our conversations, I think you could tell that if I like something, I like it. If I don't,
Oh, yeah.
you know,
I think that's why you and I get along as well, because you had mentioned that I'm very, what was it? I can be brutally honest, and I think you are as well. So,
oh yeah. I will say this though. I mean, to me, the way. All right, so I'm when I say I'm a fan, I've seen Four Mills versus Zombies. I've seen,
I'm sorry.
I'm not for one scene, but I'm not going to talk about that scene. It involves the kitchen. That's all I'm going to
Right.
say.
Oh, I know the scene. It's my favorite scene too. So,
Oh yeah. But I will say this that I am quite sure you got tons more coming out. You just got to have time to do it. Which, trust me, we're all patient people, and from the little group that I've shown your movies and myself and my wife, we appreciate you for what you do.
Well, I appreciate you guys sincerely. Thank you so much. I really, really do.
All right. So with about 3 minutes left, would you like to plug where they can reach out to you, see your movies, and all that other good stuff?
Absolutely. If you're interested in obtaining a physical media copy of any of my films, they are available on both DVD and Blu ray at makeflix.com, and they're also available at diabolicdvd.com. For that matter, you can look me up on Facebook as James L. Edwards 3, or on Instagram under Buffalora Entertainment Group. Reach out to me and order direct, and I'll even sign it for free for you.
All
I'll
right.
even I'll even throw in some signed posters.
All right. Oh, see, now I'm gonna have to give me some posters.
I
I gotta put you on my wall of fame.
could have swore I sent you posters. I'm sorry.
Oh no, it's okay. uh, but yeah, I just want to thank you again for coming on, taking time out, and having this conversation. I appreciate you.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me again. It's always a blast.
Oh, yeah. Oh, you're always welcome here. Trust me, you're part of the NC-17 family now. So,
Nice.
oh yeah. Until then, everybody, it's been a great show. Everyone, please reach out to James L. Edwards 3 on Facebook, or what was the Instagram one again?
Buffalora Entertainment Group.
On Instagram. Make sure you watch his movies because you don't know what you're missing. All right. Until next time, stay NC-17.